Let me introduce you to what it is that we're going to be doing. There is, as we know, there are 6 segments. They call them the orders. Sidrei Mishna, right? There are 6 segments of the Mishna. And in turn, the Gemorah obviously comments on these 6 segments. Each one of them is on a particular series of topics that fall under an umbrella. So this is what we call Nezikin. In other words, the first one is called Zroim, which is laws associated with agriculture. Then you have Moyed, which is laws associated with the times of the year. Then you have Noshim, which are all the areas of law that have to do with marriage and women's obligations and taking oaths, etc., etc. And we're in the section called Nezikin. Nezikin is things that have to do with liability, with the responsibility, with financial issues, property law, the role of the Sanhedrin, etc. Now, within Nezikin itself, there are 3 tractates that are seen as a series. They are called the 3 Bavois, not to be confused with the word Bobbas. That's, I hear sometimes people get that confusion. A Bava in Aramaic, and remember Aramaic is obviously going to be a very big part of this experience, a Bava is a gate. So they are called Bava Kama, which means the first gate, Bava Metzia, which means the middle gate, and Bava Basra, which means the last gate. And collectively, the 3 of them are sometimes all referred to by that term Nezikin. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because there may be times along the way where we refer to the term Nezikin, and what we're actually referring to is these 3 tractates. So we're learning Bava Metzia, the second in the trilogy. And the reason we're learning Bava Metzia is because it will introduce us to some very pragmatic concepts, things that are going to be relatable, that you could apply in daily life, as well as it will introduce us to concepts in Gemorah that are very useful for us to know. So let's just quickly look at the page. And as you can see, there's a heading at the top of the page. This is how all Gemorahs are laid out. So the heading is divided into 3 sections. The left part of the heading is the name of the tractate, Bava Metzia. See that? Bava Metzia. The right part of the heading is the name of the particular chapter that we find ourselves in. So this chapter is called Shnaim Ochazin. And the middle part will tell you what number chapter it is, Perek Rishon. So it's the first chapter of Bava Metzia. The chapter is called Shnaim Ochazin. I think many people over here are already familiar with the idea that in Gemorah, there's no page 1. So if you look on the left-hand side, also at the top, you'll see the letter Beis, and you'll see a single dot. The letter Beis means page 2, which is always the first page of any Torah book, and the dot is very important for us. Because I'm sure you're familiar with the term daf. You've heard the expression daf? Now, the direct translation of the word daf is a page. And if you want to be very fancy, people use other expressions that daf is a page, and then we get what's called an amud. People call it a folio. But basically, the way that the Gemorah is laid out, and this becomes the template for most Torah books, is that we only give a page number on the first page. When you turn that page, you're still on the same page number, but now you're on side B. Okay, so we call it Daf Beis Amud Aleph. So it's page 2, side 1, represented in this particular print of the Gemorah by a single dot. When you turn the page, they'll have it as Beis with 2 dots. So now you know that you're on page 2, side 2. The older Gemorahs just didn't have the page number on the second side. So they'd only have the page number on all, so to speak, facing pages.
So is it relevant what's on both sides?
Yeah, for sure.
So is the end of the second page on the second side, is that the end of the section?
No, definitely not. It's definitely not paginated as conveniently as that. And you could have a topic, you could have multiple topics on a single page, or you could have one topic that goes over many, many, many pages. Okay, it's just broken the first rule of the Shir.
No, I'm not using it.
we will have no study aids other than the study aids provided, right? Okay. Anyway, so what we've got to do before we can begin this, and as you can see, what I've tried is to illustrate a little bit of the breakdown of how this page is going to flow. The goal is to actually get a Gemorah. This is just to get us started, but the goal is really to have an actual Gemorah yourself that over the course of time one of the most rewarding things that you can do when you learn Gemorah is to reach a point where you look back at the earlier pages and say, oh wow, I can't believe I had to make so many notes. So, it's quite a rewarding thing. But also there's a value in owning a book and owning an actual Gemorah yourself and not just relying on the copies that we're going to be using. But in this case, as you can see, I've just tried to color code the layout of this particular page of the Gemorah, including drawing your attention to some of the Rashi commentary. Remember, Rashi is always on the inside of a page, and the commentary of Tosfos is always on the edge of the page. So in this case, Rashi is to the right, and Tosfos is to the left. On the next page, correct. So just, again, when you have the book, so you'll tell, here's the spine. Rashi is where the spine is, and Tosfos is always where the edge is. So as you can see, I've highlighted just a few Rashis. Rashi has its own challenge because the printers chose to print Rashi and Tosfos in a different script to the script that we're used to, and it's very confusing for people. It is no, Rashi is Hebrew with a dash of Aramaic.
But the script is makes it.
The script is just again, it's a script that the printers used so that you could easily distinguish. Remember, they didn't have the typesetting that we have today. Well, nowadays we don't even use typesetting. So to distinguish the Rashi from the body of the Gemorah and the Tosfos from the body of the Gemorah, they used a different font. It's just that the font is difficult for us to recognize because it doesn't look like the letters that we're familiar with. And so as a result of that, I've kept the Rashis right now to a minimum because over time, hopefully there's too many skills to try and learn at once. There's Hebrew language, there's Aramaic language, there's concepts, there's punctuation, there's phraseology, and there's now another whole script. So let's leave the script for now. There are certain Gemorahs that have moved away from this, and they've printed Rashi and Tosfos in the regular script, like the block script that people could easily recognize, which obviously is very helpful. Practically, it's a very helpful thing. So what we're going to do is, let's first introduce ourselves to the topic at hand. I'm going to show you the overview first of the Mishnah, and then we're actually going to go to the other handout, which takes the Mishnah and breaks it down literally, linearly, right? Line by line. Many years ago, when I started teaching Gemorah in high school, and I did that for 15 years until I realized that my son was going to be in my class, and I couldn't handle that thought. So I took a sabbatical that persisted until today. But one of the things that I learned when I was teaching the high school boys is when you can break something into a linear method, it makes it a lot easier to try and unpack what the Gemorah is saying. If you're going to start crowding into the Gemorah itself, your little notes on top of words, it's doable, but it becomes very difficult. Whereas like this, what we're doing is you'll see it. You'll start naturally starting to see how the phrases are split up because you have it presented to you over there in a way that those phrases are split up. So if you could just pull apart the two handouts so you could see them side by side for a moment because it's going to be quite useful. So what I've tried to do over here is this. At the top of the handout are the key terms that you're going to need for this piece. You'll notice it's not the translation of every single word. And I think it's really important for us to distinguish between words that are a matter of if I know Hebrew or not, and words that are useful to build a dictionary with. In other words, some of these terms are going to come up often. So we may as well start learning to identify what these terms are, and more importantly, where these terms come from. Remember, in Hebrew, we're going to see the same in Aramaic, words come from roots, from 3-letter roots. And if you understand what the root is, it helps you very often to be able to identify what the word is, even if it's presented in a different way. It might be presented as a plural, as a future tense verb, or whatever the particular case is. There'll be prefixes, there'll be suffixes. So one of the things we want to do is start building up a dictionary. So that's what you got at the top, is the key terms that we want to start building up. That's going to be represented by the icon with a little book in it. Then, represented by the icon with a light bulb, these are going to be concepts. So here we're not looking so much at the translation alone. Here we're looking at concepts. And in this particular case, we're choosing concepts that are going to be discussed throughout this entire section of the Gemorah that we're about to start. Now, there will be other concepts that come to light when we get to later sections in the Gemorah. But like these two concepts over here on the list, Hefker and Chazaka, they're going to be really valuable to understanding the whole first part of the Gemorah. Once you've got those introductory pieces of information, the next thing you've got is the linear breakup of the first part of the Mishnah. And what I've done is I've highlighted the shoresh, the root of words, in blue. Prefixes and suffixes that are common in red, and suffixes, not too many prefixes, but suffixes that are specific to this particular scenario, those are the ones in orange. Okay, and right now that might not make a lot of sense, but as we start to learn it, I think you'll see what I mean by that. And then after that, before going on to the next piece, just some questions to stimulate thought process that's going to be useful for us, because right now we're learning the Mishnah, so these are going to be questions that will lead us into where the Gemorah is going to go with us. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of how this whole thing is going to work. All right, let's have a look at the Mishnah without reading a word. Okay, without reading a word, what you'll see is that the Mishnah is going to present us with scenarios. Those are highlighted in purple. And then it's going to tell us the halachic ruling regarding that scenario, and that's highlighted in yellow. So at a glance, you can already tell where this Mishnah is going.
When we look at the Gemara, we're not going to see the purple and the yellow. How do we know that?
Right. You're not going to see... once you open a real Gemara, they are not color-coded, right? So these are things we're going to have to learn, and the only way to learn this is with practice and experience and exposure. But because we're not at that point yet, so that's why we're using color-coded printouts, just to help us put it together. So purple is the scenario. Purple is the scenario. Yellow is the halacha regarding that scenario. So that means at a glance, I can tell that there are 4 scenarios in this Mishnah. And then obviously I've got 4 halachic definitions relating to those scenarios.
But is it a halachic definition, or is it a debate? Is it a
good question.
Debate?
Good question. In this Mishnah, there is no debate.
Okay.
There are Mishnahs that have debates. But this first Mishnah that we're going to study doesn't have debates on any of these topics. The Gemorah will have a whole lot of debate, and that's what you see. There's a greater range of colors in the Gemorah because there are more moving parts in the Gemorah, which we'll still get to. But for now, all we need to know is that we're going to be discussing 4 scenarios, and then an halachic response to each of those 4 scenarios. Okay, so that's your overview. That's your overview of the Mishnah. Now, at this point, you have absolutely no idea what the topic is. All you know is a sense of the structure of what this Mishnah is looking to do. So it's going to tell me case A, law A. Case B, law B. Case C, law C. Case D, law D. That's how it's going to do it, right? So at this point, I don't even have to know yet what the topic is, because I know where we're going. I know what this Mishnah is essentially looking to do. Right.
So how do you know that it kind of stops there and ends and begins with the...
Great question. How do you know where things start, end, move?
You can see it if there's a Gemorah debate, right? It might say, Tana Rabon or whatever the word is. But here it's just like, looks like Shali Zeh.
Right. Good. So this is one of the big differences between a Mishnah and a Gemorah. In Gemorah, the terms that help us know what's coming next are often more specific than what you have in a Mishnah. So in a Mishnah, ironically, you actually have to start getting used to what makes sense in the sentence. And I'm sure I told you the story before when we were learning Gemorah many years ago as high school students, and we were learning the Gemorah in Makos, and the Gemorah talks about the penalty for a person who curses their parents, which is actually a capital offense. So the Gemorah says this: obviously a person can only be executed once, right? So what happens if a person cursed both their parents? Now what do you do? So the Gemorah goes like this. It says, Aviv Kilel, a person cursed his father, Imoy Kilel, and then he cursed his mother. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says the law is X and Y. So the person I was learning with got the punctuation wrong, and he landed up reading it like this: Aviv Kilel Imoy. His father cursed his mother. Kilel Rabbi Akiva. Then they cursed Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so unfortunately, there are certain things that we only learn through experience and through exposure, to start to see how things make sense in terms of the breaking up of phrases. some things you can be shown this is an indicator. Some things just eventually start to make sense once we become more familiar. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about? The topic is possession. That's the topic we're going to be talking about. Possession. Now, if I had to ask you the first idiom of possession that comes to your mind, what would it be? Okay, what's the idiom? Possession is 9/10 of the law. Yeah, you familiar with that one? Possession is 9/10 of the law. That has halachic basis. So if we're going to be talking about possession, that's part of what we're going to be talking about. You know, the fact that somebody has something surely tells a story. Can you imagine what a crazy world we'd live in if I could walk up to you right now and say, give me my jacket back? It'd be crazy. The fact that you're wearing the jacket surely tells a story. The likelihood is it's your jacket if you're wearing it. The likelihood is what we call chazaka. From the word chazak. You have a strong claim to an item if you have a chazaka. Now, the correct legal term for it, they call it legal presumption, which basically means we assume that if you've got it, it's probably yours. So we assume that the law is on your side. Chazaka. By the way, besides the fact that the word chazaka sounds like the word chazak, which means strong, there is another word that it also links to. And that is lehachazik, which means to hold. Because when you have a chazaka over something, you're holding it. So let's just do a few scenarios quickly. Let's do a few scenarios. So what does it mean when you do something 3 times? It's now presumed that you're going to do it again. So, legal presumption. Okay? It's exactly, perfect. It's exactly what it is. So, let's go around the table. And when I say go around the table, I don't mean everybody give an example. I mean, let's look around the table and let's determine the chazaka of different things that right now you have in your possession. Okay, so, Jacob, you're holding a pen. How do I know it's your pen? What makes me think it's your pen? Because you're holding it. I don't care how it got you. The fact is you're holding it. So that already lends credibility to the possibility, to the likelihood that this is your pen. So you have a chazaka that that's your pen.
Could have borrowed it, though.
Correct. Gary borrowed my pen.
I've never seen that pen before.
That's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. You're getting too complex, too detailed. I don't care if I've seen it or haven't seen it. He's holding the pen. Likelihood is it's his. Now, Gary happens to be holding my pen. Factually. Happens to be holding my pen.
Well, I would never know that.
Okay? You won't know that. So you look at this. You assume that the pen is his. Now, I come to Gary and I say, that's my pen. What if he decided to say, no, it's not? What would he say next? I said, it's my pen.
I'm holding it.
What would he say next? What would he say next? What would he say next? I'm saying, it's my pen. I'm telling him it's my pen. He's going to say what? He's going to say what? What's his defense? I'm saying, that's my pen. What's his defense?
You go.
He's going to say, prove it. Because if I have a chazaka and somebody wants to contest my chazaka, I am within my rights to say, the onus is on you. I look like the owner of the subject. There's no reason to assume I'm not the owner of the subject. If you have an accusation against me, prove it. Okay, next one. So, how do I know that that's Rob's jacket? He's wearing it. It's a chazaka. So the likelihood is 90% of the time, if you're wearing something, it's yours. Unless you are a girl with many sisters, in which case it's probably your sister's. But, right, if you're wearing it, it's probably yours. Next. How do I know that that is Rowan's phone?
Next to him. It's right behind him.
It's next to him. He's the closest person to the phone. Likelihood is it's his phone. We all know how protective we are of our devices. If it was my phone, I wouldn't leave it in front of Rowan, of all people. Right? No, I mean that seriously, of all people. Right? I will come back, my phone will be doing other things that it never did before. So, right? So proximity also has an element of chazaka to it. It's not nearly the same as actual possession, but if something's in my proximity and it's normal for it to be in my proximity, the likelihood is it's also mine. Okay, last one. How do I know, Les, that your apartment is yours? So, maybe you hijacked a building. How do I know it's yours?
Documents.
Are you going to bring out the documents when I'm standing at your door shouting that it's not? How do I know it's yours?
Your possessions are in there.
Because what?
He's in it.
He's in it, so he could have hijacked it.
Your possessions are your keys.
He's got the keys. So, up until now, we've spoken about possession of things that are movable. But I'm just mentioning, by the way, it's not going to be our conversation here. This belongs in Bava Basra, because Bava Basra is about property laws. But it will come up in Gemorah here as well, that having the key to a property is the chazaka of that property. Right? If I have the key, the likelihood is it's mine. Okay, it's not that simple, because I could have asked you to go get something from my house and given you the key. So the truth is, it's not just that I have the key, it's that I made the key. If I change the locks, so if you're renting something, then normally the fact that you have access, that you have the key, would be the indication that you are the current temporary owner of it, but you have temporary possession. It's still possession. And by the way, there's a big area of Gemorah that talks about in which ways rentals and sales are similar and in which ways they are different. So it's a really important point. But from the perspective of possession, we haven't discussed how long your possession is legal for. Currently, you have possession. That's what we're talking about. And so currently you have possession. The way you have possession will be the same, regardless of whether it's for the now or for the long term. It doesn't make a difference. The means of possession will be the same. Very good point. Okay. So far it's all really fine and good, right? It's all fine and good.
Seems like a weird description or definition, because if you steal something...
Thank you. Brilliant. So, does a thief have possession of the stolen item? 100% yes. Because if he didn't have possession, how could you prosecute him? It has to be that it came into his possession in order for it to be a crime. Possession could be illegal possession as well. So a thief who's now got the item in his possession, that's why I can prosecute him, because it's in his possession, and that's wrong. Therefore, he deserves to be punished. Very good point. Okay?
So how does it work with, like, I know with the lulav, when you give it to someone,
yes,
you got to say you give it as a gift. Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting one. The lulav is an interesting one, because the Torah tells us that at least on the first day of Sukkot, which if you're outside of Israel is the first 2 days of Sukkot, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of the lulav, the mitzvah has to belong to you. So therefore, you're supposed to, and people unfortunately don't always think of this. But if you're lending your lulav to somebody on the first 2 days of Sukkot, you should actually specify to them, I'm giving this to you as a gift, so that it therefore becomes theirs, so it's in their possession, so that they fulfill the obligation of it being theirs. But we also mandate that it should be a gift that you'll then return back to me as a gift, because obviously we need our lulav back. Okay? Yeah, good point. All right. We
haven't even started.
What's interesting about Gemorah? What's interesting about Gemorah is sometimes you could read or learn a scenario in the Gemorah and think this is never going to happen in real life. It's never going to happen in real life. And then it does. In fact, when we were learning, not this particular section of this Gemorah, but when we were learning this Gemorah in high school many, many years ago, I'm saying when I was teaching the high school boys, there was a case that happened, I think it was in the UK, where a frum guy bought a used piece of furniture. I think it was a desk, an office desk. And when he took possession and when he took ownership of when it was delivered, so, which obviously is one way that you could take possession, right? if something is delivered to my house and is now sitting in my property, it's in my possession, even if I've never seen it, right? Because my property can acquire on my behalf. So anyhow, so this desk, or I think it was a desk, was delivered to his house, and when he came home and he wanted to obviously, check it out and see it was in good condition, blah, 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 he found a false compartment at the back of the drawers. It was, I think that's a different story. This is, and there was cash. And he tracked down the original owner and returned the money, and it made it into the newspapers. Because nobody could imagine that somebody would actually do something like that they would return something, So you read a scenario in the Gemorah where it says, what happens if you find something in a place or whatever. You think it's never going to happen. So the scenario that the Mishnah opens with is a scenario you think it's never going to happen. It's such a far-fetched scenario, you think it's never going to happen. And the funny thing is that in our shul, we had something that happened that was almost like this scenario. It wasn't identical, but it was almost like this scenario. So the Gemorah is going to use the word over here, talis, but when it uses the word talis, it has no religious significance. See, for us, a talis is a religious garment. But the real meaning of the word talis is a cloak. And it's just that if the cloak has the correct dimensions and shape, in other words, then it has to be made into a talis. But the actual meaning of the word talis is a cloak. So this is going to be a scenario of two people who are arguing over who owns this particular cloak. So the reason I say, it didn't happen identically, but we really had a story here once in the shul where a guy arrived and he was new to the community. I have to be careful what information I share because some of you know the story. And he arrives here in shul one morning, and another guy who's a veteran member of the community is getting ready to put on, is putting on his talis and tefillin, and the guy goes over to him and says, "You're wearing my talis." Literally, he says, "You're wearing my talis." And he says, "What are you talking about? I just took it out of my talis bag." He says, "I don't care where you took it out. If you obviously put it into your talis bag yesterday, because that's my talis." And it became this very tense interaction over here, right here in the shul. Very tense interaction where the guy was the one claiming the talis was particularly aggressive in his claim, and then afterwards had egg on his face when he went and discovered his talis sitting somewhere else in the shul. So we're going to be talking about people who are fighting over a talis, except the talis that they're describing is not a religious talis, it's just a cloak. Okay? So let's have a look at the words that we're going to need to know for this first part. So look at the handout, you've got the vocabulary at the top. So let's quickly have a look at some of the words that are relevant for us. We've got the root, and by the way, whenever you refer to a root, whether it be in Hebrew or in Aramaic, you don't read it as a word, you pronounce it as the letters, because we want to highlight the fact that this could appear in many different forms, so we don't want to get locked into a particular word. So the first root we're going to look at is Aleph Ches Zayin, which is the root to hold. Okay? So if you want to say it in the present tense, you'd say Oy Ches, holding. If you want to say it in the plural, you'll say Ochazin. Or, as we do in the Mishna, sometimes we say Ochazin, which is a little bit more similar to the Aramaic, interestingly. Okay? If I want to say you hold, I could say Toy Chaz. You hold. The aleph goes a little bit silent over there. Okay, so there are many variations of how this word could play out. We have to know if I'm looking at a root Aleph Ches Zayin, the word means to hold. Okay, the next one you should know. Aleph Mem Reish. It's certainly a much more common word, right? What's Aleph Mem Reish? To say, like Vayomer. Vayomer Hashem El Moshe Leimor. We say it every single day, 3 times a day. Right? Vayomer means, and he said. So Aleph Mem Reish is to say. Present tense, Oimer. Plural present tense, Oimrim. Okay? He said, Omar. Okay? So Aleph Mem Reish. Next root that we need is the root Mem Tzadik Aleph. Matzah, Moitze, Metzia, not the Metzia we're learning. That's spelled differently. That's Mem Tzadik Ayin. Okay, this is so Mem Tzadik Aleph. Anybody know? Matzah, Moitze, Metzia, find. So have you ever heard people say I was at the shops and I really got a metzia. What do they mean? They mean a bargain. And a bargain is basically a good find. Okay? Where else do we have the word metzia that we would be familiar with? Anybody know? No? Okay. So we have an expression that you should all know from King Solomon. Matzah isha, matzah toiv. He who finds a wife finds goodness. You got to know this one. It's good. Trust me, it will be very valuable to you at certain points, right? So there you have it too. Matzah, found. It's actually in the past tense. Matzah isha, he found a wife. Matzah toiv, he found something good. Okay.
Is there a connection of matzah? Like
Actually not, because that's matzah with a hey, and this is matzah with an aleph, and there actually the word that we use, the correct word that we use for that, the afikomen is the matzah itself, but the part of the seder where you go looking for the matzah is called tzafun, which means hidden. It's more about the hiding than the finding. The finding became one of the activities to keep the children engaged as long as possible in the seder, but the point is really more the hiding than the finding. Interestingly enough. Okay. All right. This is not really the root per se. This is just the word as it's most commonly found. Kof lamed, which is kol. Kol means all. Right? Kol ha'olam kula. Right? Okay. You know these things. Next. Shin lamed. Shel. Shel means of. So we say sheli. What does sheli mean? Of me, otherwise known as mine. Shelcha, of you, otherwise known as yours. Shelachem, plural of yours. Shelahem, plural theirs. Okay? So shel means of, and whenever you put a suffix onto it, it'll be of who. So belongs to who. Next word we're going to look at is Shin Beis Ayin. Shin Beis Ayin. Not to be confused with Sin Beis Ayin. And there is no way that you could tell that in the Gemorah if it's a Shin or a Sin. But Shin Beis Ayin means to swear. A Shavua is an oath. Is to be satiated. V'achalta v'savata. Okay, that's the Sin one.
When you say there's no vowels, there's no dots on the shin or the
correct.
street.
Nothing at all. No clues whatsoever. All right. The city Be'er Sheva, how did it get its name? Not between the parts. Something similar. How did Be'er Sheva get its name? Because there had been this conflict between the different families. There was Avraham and Yitzchak's family at different points in history. And then there were the Philistines who they were fighting over water sources. They were fighting over wells. And when they got to Be'er Sheva, they made a covenant at Be'er Sheva that they weren't going to fight with each other anymore. So therefore, we actually read this on Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, they called the place Be'er Sheva Kisham Nishbe'u Shnehem, because there Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, and Abraham, they made a covenant there. So they called the place the well of the covenant. Right? What's the covenant? It's like an oath. They made they swore to each other that they're not going to have bad blood between them. Okay? Shin Beis Ayin. The next word we need over here is Ches Tzadik Hey. Do you recognize that word from anywhere? I'll give you a clue. We're able to have this kind of little enclave over here because of a word. Mechitza. What's a mechitza? A divider. Right? A divider. Ches Tzadik Hey means to divide. Oh, good. Havdalah is to distinguish, and this is to divide. So distinction can also be a concept. Division is very tactile. It's like very practical. So how do you say half in Hebrew? Chetzi. Same word. Okay? What do we have to donate? Well, in the old days, what did they have to donate every year in the month of Adar to the Beis Hamikdash? They had to donate machatzis hashekel, a half shekel. Okay, so ches, tzadik, hey, that is the root for the word to divide. Oh, sorry, to divide. And the last one we're going to look at today is ches, lamed, kuf, and that is a portion. So kol Yisrael yesh lahem, every single Jewish person has chelek lo'olam haba, a portion in the world to come. Okay, now, portion could also mean a portion. In other words, I could apportion things. So I could be choylek, which means you have your opinion and I am choylek. I have a different opinion. So you have your portion and I have my portion. Or you have your piece and I have my piece. Or it could be choylek nechasov. That's an expression we're going to come across in our Gemorah, not immediately, but later. Choylek nechasov, to apportion one's assets. We speak about apportioning the land. You get a chelek in Eretz Yisrael. You get a portion in the land of Israel. Okay, so these are words that are really, really important for us. So what have we learned over here? We've got a bunch of dictionary words. We've learned this principle called chazaka, which is legal presumption. We have one more term that we have to learn before we can actually start the Mishna. And I know that everybody's on the edge of their seats and itching to actually read words that are actually in the Gemorah. But before we do that, what does the word hefker mean? You've got to know this word. Hefker is going to come up a lot in our conversation. What does hefker mean? Ownerless, abandoned. It can even mean anarchy sometimes. You can talk about an environment that is hefker. There's no leadership. There's no control. You know, in slang, the Yiddish slang, people use the expression a hefkerwelt, which basically means an abandoned or ownerless world. That can happen. Why is it relevant over here? So this is important. We're discussing possession, right? If you're discussing possession, you have to consider the possibility of something that nobody possesses. In other words, how do I come to possess something? Let us count the ways. How do I come to possess something?
I could give it
I could take it, and that could be legal or illegal. I could be gifted it. I could buy it. What else?
Who could just arrive?
You can
Just
dwell,
acquire
you
it.
can be on it. You can,
I can.
it's like the different,
Okay, so you're 100% right. Let's just stick to movables for now. Let's just because that's what we're going to be talking about. Not because that's incorrect, just because that's what we're going to be talking about is movables. So I could take it, be given it, buy it, create it, find it. What else? Inherit it, steal it. Okay, those are different ways that a person can come to possess something. Now, there's a big difference, obviously, if I'm trying to possess something that already has an owner. Because if I want to possess something that already has an owner, then clearly it has to be with the owner's consent.
Well, there can only be one owner.
At any time. Well, there could be partners. You can own something in partnership. Even a movable item. You and I could own the same car. You can have it on Sunday, Tuesday, and whatever. You know, like we could do something like that. So, typically, if I'm going to want to possess something that is already possessed by somebody else, they'd have to be party to this. They'd have to consent. Otherwise, it's illegal, and that we call theft. But if something has no owner, then I become the one who determines my ownership of it. In other words, if you're walking on the beach and a beautiful shell washes up onto the beach, you don't have to ask anybody's permission to take the shell, unless you're in some marine protected area where the government has their big signs. Then but fine. But right on average, why? Because it's hefker. It has no existing owner. Therefore, it's open season for whoever wishes to take it. All right. With all of that introduction, let's have a look at the actual Mishnah itself. Now, you can choose if you're going to look in the real page or you're going to look in the handout page. It doesn't really make a difference. Let's unpack. Shnaim Ochazin be Talis. Okay, let's unpack that together. Shnaim. What does Shnaim mean? Two. Ochazin. Holding, right? So two people holding be Talis. They're holding a cloak. Two people are holding a cloak. So last time you thought of a joke about an Englishman, Irishman, and a Jew who walked into a bar. Two people are holding a cloak.
Just a So the word Shnaim is in the heading. It's actually the first word of the Gemara.
It is the first word of the
always
Gemara.
like?
So the very first Mishnah of every Gemara, this is stylistic. It has nothing to do with anything except the printers wanted it to make it to look nice. They always put the first word
So
inside the
other
block.
Gemaras that's not like.
The original ancient Gemaras probably weren't like that, but I mean we've got Gemaras going back hundreds and hundreds of years that have this. And by the way, it's not uncommon in yeshiva to say we're not out of the block yet, which is kind of how you felt for a bit over here tonight. We're not out of the block yet. We just got out of the block.
This block.
Yes,
The word, yeah.
yes, we just got out of the block. Okay, so Shnaim Ochazin Talis. There are two people holding onto a cloak. Ze oimer. What's ze? This. Ze oimer. This one says. Okay? This one says. So ze, this, oimer is saying. So this person is saying. Remember, the Mishnah will not tell us every single word. The Mishnah wants to be as precise and concise as possible. And so remember, every word in Hebrew is either male or female. Ze is a male word. You must know that that's referring to a person. We just said two people are holding a talis, a cloak. So ze is one of the people. So ze, this one, Oimer says, Ani. Everybody knows Ani, right? Ani, I. Metzah si ha. Let's break this word up. So, metzah is the root. What's the root? Find, right? What is matzasi? If I had to just see the word as that, matzasi, that suffix, taf yud, means I, past tense. Ani matzasi, I found. Now there's another suffix after that, ani matzasi ha. If I have a Hebrew word that ends with the letter hey, and I should say a Hebrew verb that ends with the letter hey, then I am, now we're talking about female. Matzasi, I found. Matzasi, ha, I found her. Why is it her? Why is it female? Because talis is a female word. Female words in Hebrew end either in a hey and the preceding letter has the comet sound under it, or they end in a tof. Talis ends in a tof. It's a female word. So matzasi, ha, I found it. Now, let's pause for a second. What is he telling us if he says I found it? What does he mean when he says I found it? No, that's not what it is. Then he could have said it's mine. What does he mean when he says I found it? Let's just think for a second. What does it mean I found it? I what?
Own it.
Is that what he's saying? He's saying I owned it.
They're saying I acquired it.
If I find it, it was just sitting there. I found it. It was just sitting there. Didn't belong to anybody. That's implied. That is implied in the word finding, is implied that it was hefker. Now, the Gemara is going to test whether that's true or not. But in all likelihood, if you say, I found something, you're implying it was hefker. So, litigant number one, and now I've just made a big announcement, right? I call him a litigant. This is not a street brawl. Because if it was, how could we rule on it? You can't rule about what people are doing, punching themselves up in the street. So they're obviously now in some formal setting where they're presenting their views. So we don't know who they're talking to yet, but if the the Mishnah is going to give us a ruling, they must be speaking to somebody who could give a ruling.
Well, he's saying it very clearly. I found it.
But I'm saying, but who's he saying it to? Obviously somebody who could tell, yes, you can keep it, no, you can't have it.
He's saying it to the other person who's going to say something.
Ah, good. So maybe it's just saying it to the other person. Maybe. Good. So let's see. So Ze Oimer, the first person says, Ani Metzasia, I am the person who found this cloak. Ze Oimer Ani Metzasia. Now this is easy to translate. Ze Oimer Ani Metzasia.
Also the male.
And the other person says, I'm the one who found it. So now we've got two people holding a cloak, each with the same claim against
They've got the same version. Actually.
the same version. Yeah, exactly, literally, like in the cartoons. You know? It's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. Exactly. Ze Oimer.
Now who's this then?
Ah, good. Who's this there?
Must be the judge.
Who's this there? Ze Oimer. The first one says, because look what he's going to say next. The first one says, Kula Sheli. What's Kula? It's all mine. Kula, kol means all. Kula, all of it. Why is it kula? Because it's a feminine word, a talis. That's why it's kula, not kuloi. Kuloi would be masculine, right? So kula, all of the talis, all of the cloak, sheli, belongs to me.
But the first one didn't say half of it belongs to me. Why did it?
V'zeh oimer, and the second guy says, kula, sheli. It's all mine. Okay. So at this point, how do you understand the story at this point?
Because they could have said this, it's all mine from the beginning. Why does I find it? And
Great. Excellent. Make a note of that for next time, because it's not coming up for a while. But that's a really good point. That's a really good point. So how are you seeing the scenario at this point?
What does this sentence say? Just so
This one. Zeh oimer, this person says, kula sheli, the whole thing is mine.
second
V'zeh oimer, and the second person says, kula sheli, the whole thing is mine. So right now, if you were describing to somebody who has not seen this Mishna inside, you want to say, cool, I learned this scenario tonight in the Shir about these two people who were fighting over a cloak, a talis. So just tell me, what are they each saying?
It belongs to them. It belongs to me.
That belongs to them. On what basis?
Found.
So, in other words, the guy's saying, I found it. No, I found it. It's mine. No, it's mine. That's what it sounds like, right? That's what it sounds like so far. Great. There's your scenario.
Sure, she's done.
It's a he said. Okay? So at least we got started on the Mishnah. That's the scenario. We still got to see what the response is legally, but we'll leave that for next time.
So, if you don't have